We're back for day 5, part 2 of the Josh Duggar trial coverage, and you know the disclaimer is coming, so this will not be a 100% word-for-word accurate representation of every single thing said and done in the courtroom, but rather me reading to you guys directly from my notes that I took while attending the trial to the best of my abilities. Let's go. At 1:25, we get the all rise for the judge and jury to enter the courtroom. It is now going to be the redirect examination with Justin Galfan for the defense. Government's Exhibit 74. Do you see where it references a device? Yes. What does it say? iPhone 8 Plus. See the folder path? Yes. What does it say? iPhone 8 Backup. Does the fact this image is on the iPhone 8 backup on the Mac confirm it was taken by the user of that phone? No. Just because an image exists on a device doesn't prove it was taken on that device. If I sent a picture to a friend and they saved it, it'll look like it was from their phone. You testified you were unable to look at the router since it's not preserved, correct? Were you able to determine if the password for the Wi-Fi was the same as the password on the outside of the router? No, there was not enough information from the router. Network forensics explains that rather than analyze the device, you analyze network computer forensics and network communications. Do you have training in that? Yes. What was the nature of that training? CCE, CCFE, CCFM. I am taught how to identify network information and analyze, then analyze information exchange over network communications between devices. Is that part of your day-to-day? Yes. You testified UPnP can give heightened privileges. UPnP doesn't verify trusted devices. UPnP announces itself, so if other devices can connect, it can get all the information offered and change, alter it, and use it. That applies to literally any device ever connected. Yes, Government's Exhibit 64, and it's the email with the passwords. Password was used for the Duggar Instagram since 2014? Correct. Same for the Duggar Twitter since 2014? Correct. And ePay in 2014? That's correct. If we look at same page, it's passwords for Paul Ryan Instagram page. Correct. Does it appear the password was used for a long time? Yes. Would you have any way of knowing if customers were on the car lot? No. Any way to know if an employee? No. Were you provided the opportunity to review Randall Berry's cell phone? No. William Mize's cell phone? No. Caleb Williams' cell phone? No. Are you familiar with manual triage? Yes. What's your understanding of manual triage? Looking at it like anyone would. Does it have limitations? Yes, it's a graphical interface, so it only shows what users want to see. Would unallocated space be on a manual triage? No. You need additional tools to see that. Yes. Can you remote access a device without being a Russian hacker? Yes. Remote access means logging in to access data without the physical machine. Does it remain your opinion that remote access is not only possible but plausible? Yes. They passed the witness, and now it is redirect cross-examination back to Clayman with the prosecution asking the questions. He shows the pic with the reflection on the screen. You were asked if taken by the phone. Yes. If you could prove that. Yes. Can you say if this image was taken by an iPhone? I can't. You don't know? Yes. You don't know if any customers were at the car lot? Yes. You know no employees were on the car lot, right? No. You didn't get records? No, didn't get employment records. She says she saw Frazier on the computer, though, so she could get some information from that. Would it surprise you to know that no employees were there? Yes. Hundreds of hours on this case. Yes. 5 days at HSI. Yes. You testified password wasn't relevant. Yes. You reviewed text. Correct. But you didn't factor them. Yes, I was looking for remote access. So you saw images. Yes. You didn't factor those. Yes. You look at command lines. Yes. You don't know if existed or ever used, correct? I wasn't able to see, so looking at the lack of file, that would suggest that. But no evidence. Correct. You found remote access app. Correct. But no logs that show used on other side, correct? Well, on Windows, not during the time of downloads, and no logs for Linux. So they could not exist. Correct. You have no idea. Correct. VLC streaming. Yes. Can you say if played locally or streamed? Can say streamed, I don't know if locally. You say follow forensics. Yes. While focusing on all this non-existent evidence, you failed to mention this picture in your report. I didn't feel it was necessary to include over other evidence in my report. Claimant passes the witness, so Galfan with the defense gets back up to continue questioning. You were asked again about command lines and could torrent on HP computer be downloaded from Snap Store? Yes. You say not installed since there's no evidence. Correct. Nothing further, Your Honor. Michelle Bush is dismissed at 1:45 in the afternoon. The defense then calls their next witness, Daniel Wilcox. He is sworn in, he introduces himself and spells his name for the court reporter. Where are you employed? I work for Walmart Corporate for threat assessment tool. Judge Brooks then told him to use the mic so we could all hear him better. How long have you been there? Since May of this year. Previously, you were employed where? Rogers Police Department as a cop and certified HSI officer for drug trafficking. In 2019, you did what? I worked for HSI Task Force in Rogers. Did you have a limited role there? Yes. On October 31st, 2019, were you tasked to help in this investigation? Yes. You did what? I was to call the car lot to set up a time trying to buy a car from Duggar. What role did you have in the search warrant? I was on the parameter team, so set up to make sure that no one runs off the property. That was the search warrant not executed? Yes. Not the right address? Yes. Later, were you asked to go undercover? Yes. As undercover officer, what are you doing? Playing a role of trying to purchase a vehicle. Were you involved in any other way? No. When you played the role of customer, were you told to investigate child pornography? Yes. Your role was to not be recognized? Yes. You called the number prior to the role. What was your understanding of the job? Determine if Josh Duggar was there. Specifically Josh Duggar. Yes. Was it soon after the search warrant? Shortly after. Where did you get the number? From the car lot? What happened when you called? I got voicemail, so I left a message saying I was interested in a car I found on the website. You were playing the role? Yes. Did you get a call back? I did. What happened next? I set up a meeting with Josh Duggar. I showed up on the car lot and Randy was there. He said Josh Duggar was busy, so I got out of there to come back again. Did you know who Randy was? No. Did you ask or only interested in Josh Duggar? Josh Duggar. Second time you went to the car lot? Yes. When you went, was anyone around? No, sir. Who did you meet with? Randy and Josh. What was your understanding of Randy's role? I didn't know. Did you know he worked there? Yes. Was it just you three in the office? Yes. How long was the meeting? Not long. I inquired about a car, Josh retrieved papers, I assumed they were about the car on the lot. Were you standing in the office where customers would sit? We stood. No one else knew that you were a cop? No. Did the objective appear to be Josh Duggar was selling you a car? Yes. Was Randy there the entire time? Yes. How did the interaction end? My out was that my dad was going to help me with the money for the car. By out, you mean so the government didn't have to pay for the car? Yes. Did you do any audio? No, there was no drugs. We were just seeing if he was at the business. In other cases, do officers have the ability to record? Yes. But you didn't use because the target was Josh Duggar. Yes, and then I didn't hear the rest of his answer. Focused entirely on Josh. Yes. As the agents told you? Yes. Did you tell agents what your observations were? Yes. Did you mention a laptop and an iPhone? iPhone and HP computer. Did this occur between October 31st and November 1st, 2019? I think so. Definitely not after the search warrant. No, sir. Was your understanding this was to obtain a search warrant? I didn't know their plan. Pass the witness, Your Honor. And Dustin Roberts with the prosecution is now going to be the one questioning him. Were you part of a team that secured the residence? Yes. So when you went in, you knew Josh Duggar was the name on the IP address? Yes. And when you got there, you realized he didn't live there? Yes. So you were sent in to make sure Josh Duggar was at the car lot? Yes, sir. Witness is excused. They call for a sidebar, and it is a long sidebar. Josh comes up to speak to Anna. Brooks goes to get something from the bench and comes back to continue talking in sidebar. Judge Brooks then says, "Thanks for your patience. We have one more issue I need to take up without your presence. We could do a break for 20 or 30 and you guys could go back to the jury room, or if you would give me 5 minutes, I can take this in chambers and you can wait here. The second option is my preference, but it is up to you." The jury shakes their head. So the jury will remain in the box and we will go to chambers. At 2:35-ish, so exactly 5 minutes, they come back and say, "All rise," for Judge Brooks to re-enter the courtroom. At this point, the defense rests their case. And of course, everyone in the courtroom was like, "What? Y'all are going to rest your case after having only called 2 witnesses?" I mean, we all knew they didn't have a case, but really? Anyways, that is a rant for a whole nother day, so I digress. Judge Brooks says they will now call rebuttal witnesses. The prosecution calls James Futrell with the Department of Justice back to the witness stand. Clayman with the prosecution is who is going to be questioning Agent Futrell. You testified previously. Correct. Following, did you observe the defense witness? Yes, Miss Bush. Have you prepared additional print screens? Yes, I have. How? The same as I did before. Government's Exhibit 86, are these print screens? Yes. Using Linux? Correct. Same as the defense? Yes. Virtual machine of defendant's computer. It shows what it looks like, not the defendant's copy. Galfan says, "Can we approach?" So we have another 5 minutes of sidebar. Government's Exhibit 86, subject to the sidebar. And this is Futrell talking. Used Oracle VirtualBox. I've used for many years, so I used Oracle VirtualBox. I wanted to see what it was like to install it generically. It goes with default answers, and that's what we see. And you see the Ubuntu screen. First screen is to log in and do something. Then desktop, no username or password. This is what happens when I click to install. I am on the internet. Next screen. Language, going with default download updates while installing. Do you want to erase disk and install Ubuntu? It gives me the option to do that. Significant if the user said use entire disk, it would have replaced. So user had to do this to use to. Are you sure you want to erase the entire disk? Yes. Where are you? Arkansas. And then it asks who I am. I pick a username and password, name on the computer and username. And just for your mental visual, he is doing these screenshots, going through every single step of installing, and everything he's saying is just him reading and talking to you about what's on these exhibits he's showing. Clayman then asks an actual question. Is this how it would appear on the defendant's computer? Yes, I tried to mimic facts of the case. So now we're back to Futrell talking through his exhibit. Shows how he could have used del_1. It says it doesn't like the underscore for the computer name, but it has no issue with that for the username. Then we have the install page, snapshot of install. A few minutes later, it's done. Restarts the computer to see the new log. Clayman asks an actual question. It's fair to say no issue with the underscore. Yes, no issue. Then back to Futrell talking. More print screens, yes. Same way, yes. Government's Exhibit 87. Brooks again says it is subject to earlier comments in sidebar. It mimics Josh Duggar's computer, so I'm using the same wallpaper, Ubuntu software system. Click orange box to bring it up. Search bar, I type Tor and all applications for Tor list of application. Tor browser, Tor launch. Next page is install button to initiate install. Next page after is the install. Then he is asked, did you use command lines? No. Next page is the Tor browser connected to Tor. On the screen you can see it says privacy is a human right. He goes to the Department of Justice website to prove that the browser does work. Back to Snap Store and search uTorrent, and uTorrent Wine is right there. Wine is not an emulator. It's a joke to say it's an emulator. Wine is built into the uTorrent. Enter the password to install uTorrent Wine software. Now this is real questioning between Clayman and Futrell. You created this using the same version of the defendant's computer. Yes. You made for this week. Yes. How long has it been on the App Store? Approximately 4 years. Back to Futrell talking through his demonstration. After uTorrent is installed, this is what it looks like. And then go back to the App Store for VLC, and it's there. Same as the defendant's app. It's asking for a password to install, status of the install, launch to view. VLC is loading, giving privacy network access policy. Now it shows that it's installed. This is grayed out because there is no media played. He then went to download a movie, It's a Wonderful Life, and since the copyright is up, he can download that legally. He again stresses that it is okay to download It's a Wonderful Life since it is now in public domain. BitUTorrent was the same as the defendant's. By default, it goes to the download folder, shows movie being downloaded, and the movie contains 4 items. Exhibit of file with more than movie, 1 is a subtitle. 4.6 download speed, estimated 27 seconds. Shows all of the files and how many pieces. What's relevant to us is the streaming file. This is when its complete status as seeding is making it available and lets people know that you have the movie. So once the computer has the file, it's seeding, and that is broadcasting it and that it can be downloaded and shared. Shows all pieces of the download. This page is highlighting of the movie file. VLC comes up, then Control plus LV paste, URL, and hit play. Just did Control C, Control V, copy and paste. VLC refers what's pasted into the window. The video is played locally. Opening of the movie. It's the opening scene of the movie. The movie is now playing. Go back to media and it recognizes the URL. This page is VLC Qt interface file after playing the movie. The last line is URL with browser search. There's the hash value. Now back to real questioning with Clayman. Can you explain port numbers? Every service/program that communicates needs port numbers. Does port number mean someone is accessing? No. Did you use any command lines? No, I didn't. Those URLs match what we just saw. Do these port numbers signify someone else used the computer? No, just how streaming protocols allow to select ports. Pass the witness, Your Honor. It's 3:05 and Galfan with the defense gets up to cross Futrell. Let's get a couple things cleared. You prepared these since you heard the defense witness? No, the first was done on Thanksgiving. But you didn't share. Just trying to help. So you testify you spent your Thanksgiving doing this? Wednesday, not Thanksgiving, but day before. Well, let's be clear about what we say. So you didn't share. These exhibits, you were plugged into the internet? Yes. So you're getting information not available in 2019. So you're not using forensics. There is no time machine. So not the same. Exhibit 86, you wanted to see a demonstration of the download. When did you get involved? 6 months before the charge? Yes. But a week before trial, you decided you wanted to see what the install was like? Yes. But bottom one is partition one. Yes, then could slice and dice the disk. Choose the size of the partition. Yes. You said size of partition is consistent with remote access. Did I? I don't think that I said that. 11 gigabytes when installed is the size. 8 is operating system and file logs. Yes, larger part. How much? 5 to 7 gigs. Before you install, you successfully installed Linux. I chose 10 gigabytes. Ubuntu is only 2 gigabytes. Generally, files 2 gigabytes in size. Do you disagree with Miss Bush that it was occupied? I disagree. Do you have proof? I have knowledge. Journal file system is a fancy way I spent a lot of time on log about when booted and detected devices. Defense Exhibit 83. This is forensic data from HP computer using Encase, and then some other software that I didn't catch. Futrell answers that it was Encase. Encase? Correct. You heard Bush is certified. Yes. You're not. I've done this for over 20 years. Log files? Linux writes over log files, yes. So to preserve evidence, you have to move quick. Yes, to get, and I didn't hear the end of the answer. So Linux writes over faster. It writes over the same as a Mac. So the May logs, did they exist in November of 2019? And Agent Futrell has finally had enough of the bullshit. You're misleading. The file goes to log, it recycles the next day, will add 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, so they existed. When you say they don't exist, there are logs, but it does normal housekeeping. Where were you the day before Thanksgiving? Philadelphia at my sister-in-law's. Why does this say Chicago? The time frame to match the case evidence. Judge Brooks says, hate to interrupt, but we need to take a quick break. We do that. All rise. They come back in. They've been in chambers, apparently. Brooks comes out and says, correction on government's evidence 86 and 87 that claimant introduced through Futrell as screenshots on virtual program. I received thinking it was actual evidence. Now find these to be demonstrative aids. What's marked as Exhibit 86 and 87 will be marked as Court's Exhibits 4 and 5, respectively. Use these as an aid to the witness testimony to the extent it is useful to do so. More instructions on the final set later. Court is now back in session. Exhibit 87, and it's the background of the computer. Thursday, as in last Thursday while the witness was on the stand. I don't remember, not Thanksgiving, last 2 weeks. Did you build these in anticipation of direct? Yes. These were made on the internet? Yes. This version and build did not exist in 2019. Yes, it's a different build number and version. So these are different build number and version, 3.55, different version going back 4 years. Futrell tries to explain. And then Gelfand says, I know you have lots to say, but answer my question. I made a note that he was coming off rude as fuck and that Gelfand was not reading the room while he was questioning this witness. This build number did not exist. Correct. The Snap store also changes daily. Yes, as apps go to the store. This is 2021, not 2019, so it doesn't show 2019. Yes. Were you in court when Miss Bush showed exact opposite? I did. I don't understand them. She used a website. Do you have proof? I can testify to it. You didn't screenshot. No. All of your demonstrative aid did not exist in 2019. That app did. The version is just updated. If you actually want to know what happened, you should use forensic evidence. I will not be blinded. I look at as much evidence as possible. If something provides that, I'll do it. Shade thrown. Exhibit. Can you see this? Yes. You testified to streaming last week. And they argue the days he did these. And he says, Thursday he testified. You testified port number can mean a lot of things. Yes. They can also reference a router. Yes, router is a type of computer. With information and data? Yes. Which would be beneficial in this case? Futrell tries to talk. Gelfand's talking over him and says, not his one, you're still sticking to it. Futrell says, it gives some information but nothing relevant. That wouldn't be helpful. No. Routers recognize devices, correct. Show devices, correct. UPnP would make a network vulnerable, but you didn't know if UPnP was enabled. Objection. Scope. Agree. UPnP would be relevant to you if network was vulnerable, but you don't know if it was enabled. Annoyed as fuck. We do know. With your testimony about port numbers. Correct. Torrential downpour catches port numbers as well. Yes. Torrential downpour catches. I don't know if references port on router on computer. You offered opinion on port numbers for streaming. They show the numbers 63835. What port number is at the bottom? 27386. What port number? 27386. What this means is it goes through the router. Say it again. What this means is that it goes through the router. All communications go through the router. Leaves HP and goes to the router. That makes no sense. What goes through the router? That's being streamed to port number, so it's streamed from router. Yes. 127.0.01 is the router number. You still cannot rule out remote access. I don't know how that is relevant. You said you can't rule out remote access. I said it was possible. With UPnP, it's greater. Yes. Pass the witness, Your Honor. So Clayman is now back up asking the questions to Futrell. Based on your expert opinion, did the user have to use command lines to install? No. Did you find evidence of remote access? No. Did Miss Bush? No. Who did you determine was near the computer when child pornography was downloaded? Josh Duggar. Pass the witness. Silence. No further questions, Your Honor. Agent Futrell is then dismissed from the witness stand. Brooks says all evidence has now been received, and he tells the jury what's to come. Closing arguments, instructions, all that. And we recess for the day a little earlier than usual so that they can finalize all of the jury instructions. And that's a wrap for Day 5, Part 2 of the Josh Duggar trial coverage. Hang tight because next up is closing arguments and jury deliberations. Stay tuned.